I'm excited to share what we believe will be a healthy conversation tonight of both feedback, but also making sure you have an understanding of what we're going to be putting out in a draft form starting on Monday or Tuesday of next week. Early next week, we will have a draft of almost 300 pages, I believe, of our ESSA plan, and we hope you will read every word of it and give us feedback on the feedback form that will also be provided along with the link to our ESSA plan. Let me tell you what we're going to do tonight, though. Tonight, we want to continue sharing what we've heard from stakeholders today. We want to continue the conversation with you then after we've had that opportunity in this whole group setting. So first I will share how does the ESSA plan, the opportunity under Every Student Succeeds Act, connect to what we've done under Tennessee Succeeds, which is the strategic plan that we launched close to 15 months ago. Second, we're going to have an opportunity to dig into one new component that we will have in our state called school accountability and the A through F grading system that's actually along with the school accountability model based on a state law that was passed last year. And so we're going to have a whole group session on that. And then we will break out into smaller sessions, and in those smaller sessions we want to hear your feedback. We'll have 3 different rooms where we will have small group feedback opportunities. One will be specifically focused on our English learners. One group will be specifically focused on school accountability and the feedback around what you heard tonight. And then third, we will have a general room where you can come and give us feedback on any of the components that we've discussed tonight or other things that may be on your mind. So let me start with where we started. When you have something that is a reauthorized, essentially No Child Left Behind, we didn't start from scratch. We already had work that was in place in Tennessee that quite frankly started some years ago. But about 18 months ago, we started on a pathway to really articulate what's the vision that we have as a department and with our partners that are in the work in the State Board of Education. How would we visualize what we would be doing in our role as a state department to best grow all students? And to do that, we said our role is not to one-to-one impact 1 million kids across the state, although we wish we could. But we can if we actually work through a theory of action that the Department of Education is here to work with and through and support our schools and districts across the state. And so intentionally we've said that is what this partnership looks like, is that we're working with you. We also have a role as a state to make sure we're setting high expectations, which is what you read in this vision statement. We want to make sure all students have the knowledge and skills to actually meet the expectations that we have in our state and to ensure that they're on a pathway that when they graduate from high school, they have options, they have choices. And that was very intentional. We don't want our students to be fixed on one pathway that may not be very rigorous, and then they get a high school diploma and they can't actually take that high school diploma and have options past that degree. We have worked very diligently to ensure we have an accountability system that ensures that we meet those standards. We also have assessments that continue to improve to align to the higher expectations that we have in our state. At the same time, though, we know that we have students that even though we have rigorous high school graduation rates, they have not been set up to go right into a post-secondary environment without having to take some type of remediation. They aren't able to walk right in and take a credit-bearing coursework. We also know that even though students are starting college, they're not actually completing college. And so with that in mind, as you look at the handouts that we've provided, you see highlights of great work that we've been able to do as a state. But you also see some challenges that we know are real that we want to make sure we continue to set rigorous goals around and we continue to work in support of our districts and schools along with us to meet those goals. We set some big goals I'm going to briefly talk about. The first is just being on a pathway of continuing to improve, particularly as measured by the nation's report card. And this is a place where we can say that we are the fastest improving state in the nation, now both in math and English language arts, but also as of this past few months, science. We have moved to the ranking of 25 in 4th grade math. We've also moved to 19 and 21 in terms of ranking out of all 50 states in science in 4th and 8th grade. And the reason that is remarkable for us as a state is we've historically been sitting at around 46 or 47 out of 50. In the last 10 years, we've seen under 2 strong governors from 2 different parties really have a focus on education and say this is a nonpartisan topic. This is a topic we all have to care about, and we're going to have continuity around the improvements that we're going to make in lower education, K-12, and what we're going to do in higher education, and make sure that students are set up for that pathway to progress and that they're reaching the goals that they have for themselves. Second, we have a goal that I believe may be one of the most important goals to help us reach 1, 3, and 4. And that's we have to have more students reading on grade level earlier. This is one of the barriers to post-secondary attainment. They're struggling with reading throughout their middle school and high school years, and then that attributes to being behind. And then they are 4 times less likely to graduate from high school if they're not reading at a significant proficiency level by the time they get to 3rd grade. And then that rolls into they're more likely then never to go on into post-secondary and not to be set up for success in the workforce either, because they didn't get a high school diploma. We see the data point after data point in our state that shows we have some stagnation in reading. So we've put some intentionality around the work that we're doing that's state-led, as well as the work that I'm seeing throughout our districts. I've been very pleased to hear some strong work that has happened really the last 2 years in intentionally making reading a priority in kindergarten, 1st grade, 2nd grade, and 3rd grade. Not that you weren't already, but you're aligning some work to the depth of the standards. You're aligning your work to making sure students are on track by ensuring that you have assessments, you have data points, you have anecdotal records. You're looking at data to make sure that you know your students are on track, but you're also, quite frankly, making sure that you have time every day, all day, for them to literally read. And you can hear that they're reading and they are on track. We did a qualitative study on this, I want to note, where we went into 100 classrooms across the state a year ago. And we saw that in elementary school classrooms, that we had a very small percentage of time in many of these schools where kids were actually spending time reading. And then when they were reading, it wasn't at the depth of what our expectations are in our standards. That's an indicator that while we have had some progress, we haven't had the same progress in reading, and there are reasons why that has happened. We believe that some of that is because we have been spending a lot of time on skills in isolation and haven't brought it into the work that we're doing in real reading, rigorous reading, authentic reading, and reading to kids even before they can't read themselves, to make sure our comprehension is very strong even when it's just listening comprehension. So strong work is happening in this area, and I'm excited to say we have 200 coaches across the state in our Read to Be Ready literacy coaching work that's impacting around 3,000 teachers in our elementary schools and 77,000 kids. And that work just started, and we're thrilled that we have that type of network in Tennessee for the next 3 years. We also know that at a national benchmark, we need to show that our kids are college and career ready, whether that's ACT or SAT. You have an ACT goal here because that's the vast majority of our kids are taking the ACT. We do have a state law that requires in 11th grade all students take either the SAT or the ACT. We've set a benchmark that we want all of our students to be meeting at least a 21, and that as a state average we need to be at least at a 21. And the reality is that we have been at a 19.4 for a couple years. Before that, we were at a 19 and 19.1. We've had some growth there, but we need to continue to think about how do we improve that national benchmark that actually leads to a notion that a student is college and career ready and they can move seamlessly into credit-bearing coursework, while at the same time potentially opening up choice. And the way they do that is they can access the Hope Scholarship, which gives them more options for where they may want to go next. And then finally, we know that the majority of our high school students just a few years ago were not going directly into some kind of post-secondary environment. I can say that now, as of this year, we have 62% of our students, 5% increase over the year before due to Tennessee Promise, we believe. And those students, that 62%, That's significant that we have now the majority of our students going in to post-secondary. The challenge is, we know from our own data that a quarter of those students leave in the first year. They get to post-secondary and they don't stay. And there's a variety of reasons, but in particular, we see a correlation to whether a student has to take remediation of any kind into their eventual decision that they will not complete. So our work is to make sure students are prepared for the post-secondary environments that they enter, whether those are credentialing programs, diploma programs, degree programs. All post-secondary is important to us because they match to student credentials that help them get jobs, help them on a career pathway. And you'll see more in our plan around this particular item, particularly how we think about our career and technical education pathways that we have in our high schools, and ensuring that students are coming out with industry credentials that they can actually use upon exiting a high school, and then use that to get additional credit to go to the local Tennessee College of Applied Technology. We've done strong work in this area this past year to make sure there's continuity where students can use those credits from an industry credential or early post-secondary opportunities to use it for credit when they go to that next credential at the TCATs. Right now, we only have, as of this past year, 3% of our students moving directly from their high school graduation in Tennessee into a TCAT. 3%. The vast majority of our kids are going to either a 4-year or a 2-year community college. The TCATs are an area for us that we believe we can do more to make sure students know that this is a pathway that leads them to jobs in our state. These big goals led us to 5 priorities. We said if we were going to be very intentional and align the work that we do within the department and with our districts, where would we put our priorities? And these 5 priorities are what you will read throughout our Every Student Succeeds Act plan in all 300 pages. You're going to see a foundation around standards, assessment, and accountability, and then work around these 5 priorities. You'll hear some of these as I talk about the opportunities, so I'm going to breeze through them, but early foundations in literacy, high school and bridge to post-secondary, all means all, educator support, and district empowerment. These have been strategies that we have already implemented across not only our divisions in the department, but also in the work that we have done with districts. Still feel like many of them are in their infancy because this has been a year of implementation. We're working hard to make sure that what we do in ESSA actually supports the work that we have already started as well. So let me give you an update on what in the world is ESSA. The first time I heard that, I wasn't sure what that was an acronym for, but it is the Every Student Succeeds Act. Again, reauthorization, new version of No Child Left Behind. It is an opportunity for us to build a plan that is Tennessee specific with some flexibilities to ensure that we're moving all students to success in our state. This plan has to be built with stakeholders. In fact, why would we do it any other way? Because at the end of the day, we're all implementing this together. So the work that we've done over the past 6 to 7 months has been about engaging our stakeholders, about 2,500 individuals and organizations, to say, give us initial feedback on where should we go with what we've started, what you know about where we've been, and where you think we have opportunity for improvement. We've taken that feedback along with our own data and the work that we've started to write a plan that you will see the beginning of next week that we're talking about tonight. You have an overview of some of the opportunities in the handouts that we've given you. We are now in the stakeholder feedback period where we want to hear from you around what's missing, what do we continue to need to think about, what do you like. All of the comments that you could make, we want to hear, because ultimately that's how we're going to improve and make sure that we have ultimate buy-in from the groups that we're serving. And finally, we will be in an approval process with this plan during the spring and hope to have this into the U.S. Department of Education in April. We'll have multiple other groups that we'll be talking with in the spring, in particular the General Assembly. We'll certainly talk to our education committees, State Board of Education, the Governor's Office, and other groups that have invited us to speak to them about the work that we're doing. Quickly, just next steps. The only other next step that I want to mention that I haven't already talked about is this January 31 time frame. We will have an open public comment period like we have done with other opportunities like waivers that we have turned in before. This particular plan you will be able to see in a PDF version, again around 300 pages with some visuals, and you will have a feedback opportunity through an online feedback form. We'll continue to do town halls into January. We have one scheduled for Chattanooga during the first week of January, and then one in Upper East Tennessee during the second week. And we'll look for, we have some webinars scheduled and some other opportunities to be in front of you and to continue to get that small group and large group feedback. So what does this mean? So we've identified a plan in Tennessee through Tennessee Succeeds, and we now have a piece of federal legislation that has given us some additional opportunities. And so what we said is, well, let's identify with our stakeholders what are the opportunities that we heard over and over and over again. What did our stakeholders say in the feedback that they gave us? What do we see as opportunities, and where was a confluence? Where was there a confluence of those ideas? And you're going to see these 5 opportunities throughout the work that we will be doing, not only in accountability systems, how we've thought about new indicators within those accountability systems, how we've thought about what would we support in terms of any flexibility with resources, and how we've thought through the strategies that we should be focusing more intentionally on it. So I'm going to walk through each of these briefly. You have a handout that gives more detail on each one, and then you'll be able to see a robust amount of detail in the full plan. Opportunity 1 is setting high expectations that align to post-secondary in the workforce to again ensure that all of our students are set up on this chosen path in life. That when a student graduates, they have options. They have options because of the pathways they've been on and the things they've already been able to earn and experience. We know that our standards have been a primary reason why we have had a difference in our expectations. Many of you in this room have been strong partners in this work, and you know that a decade ago we got 2 F's from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce who said, Tennessee, you're not telling the truth to your students, to your families, about whether your students are truly on track or not. And that was because we had a significant gap between the proficient level on our own state test and what our students would see when they took national benchmark tests. We've worked hard to close that gap. And we're in a year where we have really begun to see that the reality of what we're doing in our classrooms and what we're doing inside our aligned assessments are giving us better information around how will students do on any kind of national test. Second, we know that we have to continue to improve the entire process around our assessments. And we've been in that process this past year, and we're going to continue in a transition year, 2 more transition years in particular, as we phase in online, as we think about the work that we're doing to continue to reduce time on the test, and also continue to think about alignment around that test to the work that we do at the district level in benchmarking assessments or interim assessments, or how we think about common assessments on the ground. And I'm pleased to say, since last year, we were able to look at this test and reduce the overall testing time on the TN Ready suite of assessments by 30%. We changed our test construct from the Part 1 and the Part 2 construct to one, where we were able to continue to keep the robust problem solving and writing components, but put the test into an easier one test window. The other items that we will continue to look at and have a plan for in ESSA is to reduce some time in our 3rd and 4th grades, particularly in our science and social studies tests, where we see some opportunities for alignment. The test that we currently have in our state is a test that gives us better information. If you're someone in here and you've already been able to look at our score reports that are new this year, you've been able to see that we are working diligently to give the information back to you in a very user-friendly fashion. That gives you strengths and areas for improvement and next steps, and ensures that families have the opportunity to really dig in and understand what the data says. At the same time, we've associated some websites with these score reports to ensure that our parents can go on and actually dig deeper into that information and know what it means. And we'll continue iterations of that for the next several years. At the same time with those score reports, we've done the same thing with teacher reports, ensuring that our districts and schools and the teachers in the classroom have reports that actually show, by standard, how did you do? Which is a better way to approach the work. These are actionable reports that you should be able to use to help you make instructional decisions at the local level. We started an ACT retake opportunity. As far as I know, we are the first state to do this, where we are saying, as a state, we will provide all of our seniors one additional opportunity to take the ACT if they choose, and we will do that and we'll pay for it. And we had phenomenal response. I think we had over 25,000 students who took advantage of that. It wasn't 30, so I want to say it was 26,000 students took advantage of that opportunity. It was a remarkable first year. We had lots of positive feedback around the state taking advantage of some funding to ensure that our students could continue to improve their ACT score with that second opportunity. And then finally, we do have an ACT prep course that the state has designed and is working in a little over 100 schools now to help them really own some ACT prep at the high school level. Opportunity 2 is aligning to the work that we've done in the state already around equity. It's ensuring that all of our students, particularly our students that have been historically underserved, are on a pathway to success as well. Some of the work that we're doing here is around some flexibilities that we actually have inside some funding through ESSA. In particular, we have some title funding that will now have flexibility that allows us to think about the whole child, whereas before we were having to use funding for math and reading. By the way, still important, and you should be thinking about math and reading for your funding, but providing some additional flexibilities. If you said, you know what, at my school I really need to think differently about my school counseling staff or a school nurse, or I need to think about elective offerings that I could open up to my students, or think about after-school programming that maybe I need to have available to my students that I haven't had. And we will be seeking these opportunities through some federal enrichment grants and allowing some opportunity at the district level for you to work with us to identify the needs that you have through our typical needs assessment process, and then use these funds to match to those needs. This is great flexibility as we think through what I heard over and over and over again, that if you're going to ultimately improve the academic pathway for a student, you have to meet the needs of the whole child. I believe that that is true in every single school. When we have students that are coming to school with their needs met, and then we're meeting those non-academic needs, you start seeing an academic pathway of progression. So using funds to think about that entire progression. You're going to hear more about the English language learner piece through a breakout session if you choose to go there, but exciting is that we will now have our EL proficiency, the ability of our students to learn English if English is not their first language, as an indicator in our school accountability model, and you're going to hear that in just a moment, as well as these two new indicators that Dr. Towns will be speaking about. An opportunity to learn indicator that in the first year will be focused on chronic absenteeism, and the second Ready Graduate indicator, which is about are our students showing pathways where they would be ready for post-secondary. Opportunity 3. I'm not sure I had any small group session over the last 6 months where it didn't ultimately come to, rightly so, what are we doing as a state to make sure our lowest performing schools are on a pathway to progress as well. In Tennessee, we know that support, funding, intervention, and innovation are important to ensure that students that are in some of our lowest performing schools also have maximum opportunities. We've made some changes in how we've thought about school improvement. Part of this is ESSA related, and part of it is because we know we've learned some things in the past 4 years around what we've done as a state in school improvement. First, we are now creating a school improvement continuum, which means if a school is new to the priority school list, that means this is a school that had never been in the bottom 5% of schools before. If they're new to the priority school list, meaning they've not been on a priority school list before, this is a list that has been run every 3 years in our state, so we've had 2 priority school lists to date. If they're new, then they would have an opportunity within their district with state support to make initial improvements before our most rigorous state intervention, our Achievement School District, would be an option. We want to make sure that we have opportunities with our districts with some intentionality, very specific theory of action around evidence-based practices are implemented first with the district before we would consider the most rigorous state intervention. Because at the end of the day, this is about building our capacity together to make improvements. And we will only do that in that partnership with you. In this continuum, you're going to see that if schools have been on priority school lists before, they have maybe been on one, they've maybe been on two, they've been getting intervention, and possibly they have received millions of dollars of state and federal funding, and we're still not seeing the growth. Then that is when we would have to make a decision about their eligibility for the most rigorous state intervention or the achievement school district. So there's a continuum within our work that we believe brings some clarity to the entry and exit criteria of when students and schools come into this most rigorous intervention. How does that happen? What's the clarity of that? And then how do students and schools ultimately exit? So that clarity is within the plan, and we hope that you will see that this has really always been about building our capacity to ensure that all students are being served. And how can we support each other in this work? Our arguments about who's right and who's wrong and what intervention is right, what intervention is wrong, and what school structure is right and what is wrong, that's not the conversation. The conversation is what's right for kids and how do we ensure that they're learning, and how can we do this together in a capacity building method where we don't ultimately serve a school and then 3 years later they're back on the priority school list. We've got to work in a continuing fashion in partnership, and that is the work that you'll see in school improvement. Opportunity 4 is about strengthening and focusing on our educators. You know that the most important in-school factor in a student growing is the teacher. We have some opportunities that I'm very excited about inside ESSA that allow us to use some of our flexible funds to help with pipelines of effective educators within our principal and educator prep pipelines, and to ensure that we've got really students coming out of our prep programs that are ready to become teachers on day one. The reality is that we have some challenges in our state in particular areas where we do not have strong pipelines. We don't have enough highly effective teachers ready to teach on day one, and we're struggling in those areas. So a focus on these pipelines is key. We're doing a lot to help teachers when they're in the classroom, probably not enough, but we have to make sure that we've got more actually coming in ready to serve on day one. At the same time, we'll be looking at how are we thinking through who we have in our schools right now, not before they get there, but they're already there, to ensure that we are supporting them appropriately through embedded professional development that actually matches the needs that they have. At the same time, looking at our staffing patterns. I've told this story at another town hall. It's a very brief one, but it makes a point. I had a conversation with the director some time ago, and he said, when the department gave me my human capital report, which is essentially saying, at each school, how many highly effective teachers do you have by some subject areas, math and English language arts in particular? He said, I used that to dig deeply into a particular school, and I learned that on the pathway for some of my students, they were actually never with a teacher that was considered highly effective. They had teachers all day long that were scoring a 1 or a 2 on their teacher evaluation. Now, he said, I would not have necessarily dug into that if I hadn't had a report that was really specific to a school. I've been seeing this at the district level, and you feel pretty good about how things are going. You look at it more specifically, and you start saying, what are our students experiencing? Individual students every day. We've got to do a better job of giving really an intentional focus to that student's experience. We shadowed high school students. Our entire leadership team, 20 plus of us, went out and shadowed high school students this past semester. It was very interesting what we learned. Right? Shadow a student, shadow an elementary school student, shadow a high school student, and you're going to learn that students at different schools, in different districts, in different pathways are having different experiences. But we all have the same expectations. So that intentional focus on individual students is something that we believe we can do through working with individual teachers and that support. Opportunity 5 is around empowering districts. We care about this maybe more than anything else because at the end of the day, this is about our local areas carrying the vision and doing the work to align to that vision and making it their own and ensuring that their communities come around the goals for their kids. So empowering districts is around ensuring that we have the support mechanisms through our core offices to best support the work that we're doing, ensure that you have the data and support that you need, and at the same time saying, you know what, we've spent a lot of time as a state improving our weaknesses, and we've got to still do that. You see that throughout our plan. But there's some really innovative things happening in districts across our state. We want to scale that up, and we're going to do that through some special innovative practices funds, where we're going to have you compete to take your strengths, things you're doing well, and scale those up. And let's learn from each other around what are we not doing in high school that we should be doing that could serve all of our students' needs. How can we think differently about what we do in early college? How can we think differently about personalized learning for our students? What should we be doing? We've got some pilots on micro-credentialing, thinking differently about licensure and credentialing for our teachers and ensuring that they get professional development credits that maybe have more flexibility than we've had in the past. We have 4 pilots in those areas. Dr. Earhart and the Personalized Learning Task Force has done strong work to get these pilots started, to say what can we learn, and then we're going to have some opportunities with our districts for you to compete for some funding to do some of this innovative work in your local areas. So how can we ensure that we have all students on that pathway to success?